Hello, everyone. My name is Lynn Wood.
Just put it up more.
Up more what?
Mm-hmm.
Student Services Assistant at East Los Angeles College. And my email is woodcl@elac.edu. It's a good thing my wife told me to leave my phone over here so that I could access it, because as soon as the camera came on, I felt like I couldn't remember what I was supposed to say. So I'm here sharing resources, and we're going to read from a couple of books. I have a book called The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. And this is Anne, my wife. She has a book called The Mask of Shadows by Lindsay Miller. She's going to read from that. And she's got a book that she's coloring from that I love.
You can get a coloring book in anything.
Yeah, basically, even curse words.
Yeah, this is what I colored last week.
Gave her some Louboutins.
Girl, she deserves them. And this is what I'm going to color this week.
Oh, cool. She's like she's doing a science experiment.
Shall I read it?
Okay, hold on though. When it's oh no, go ahead. It's a life of discovery.
Yeah.
It looks like a science experiment. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, it says before she was an organizer and congresswoman, Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez was a science nerd. In high school, she took second place in the 2017 International Science and Engineering Fair in the microbiology category. Her project focused on the effects of antioxidants in roundworms. She concluded that antioxidants could potentially prevent degenerative diseases brought about by oxidative stress. Who knew? It actually says who knew.
That's interesting.
So I'm gonna work
What
on
a
her
cool
next.
coloring book. Anyway, so sharing resources, the resources that I know of for sure are myself. I gave you my email address. It's woodcl@elac.edu, and I'm a student services assistant at East Los Angeles College. I can help get you through the system if you're a student or you know of a student who's struggling in our system or wants to be a student. Send me an email and I'll help them, or I'll help you. Also, Mi Centro in Boyle Heights, they're a small LGBTQ center. They are doing weekly pride pantries. They're only serving about 10 families a week, so you do need to register for theirs. And let's see, also Eastmont Community Center in Montebello, they do weekly food giveaways. You don't have to register. It's a drive up for them. And the Garage Board Shop in East LA, theirs is a walk up. It's also weekly. They ask you to bring a cart, so you don't have to register for that one either. And then this morning, my lovely wife sent me an article that I have to admit I haven't read yet, but I'll just tell you that I see Joe Biden picked Rachel Levine or Rachel Levine.
Was she in Brooklyn?
To be the first openly transgender official as his health pick. So I guess the head of the health department. It's a big change, huh? Because like at the last minute, Trump was trying to rush through some anti-LGBTQ legislation. Of course,
What a bastard.
I'm sure you saw on MLK Day, he released his 1776 report, which, pardon me for a second. His 1776 report, which had a justification for fucking slavery and some like 3/5 rule or something that I think that they used to use to justify whether or not you were human. There was justification for that in this report as well. And it just smacks of like some shit they put together at last minute. Like he went, put together the most racist report you can.
The most horrible thing you can think of.
I want to release it on MLK Day. Like that'll really make me feel like a big man.
He must have a penis about this small.
Sorry. Yeah, well, I can only venture to guess the size of his apparatus.
Sorry, you said apparatus.
Anyway, sorry, my supervisor is texting me at the same time and I kind of got to look at that, but I'm okay now. So I can't think of any other resources to share with you. I hope you'll watch the inauguration tomorrow, and whether you supported Joe Biden or not, I think it's a good time to really examine. I'm not sure
White.
what. Oh yeah.
Kamala said to wear white.
Yeah. Examine yourself and you know what you're doing with your life, how you can make positive impact in your community. It's a time for change, and I think embrace that. But yes, Kamala did ask women to wear white in support of the suffragettes. And so I don't have white jeans. I don't subscribe to the white pants category. So I'll wear a white t-shirt and support all the suffragettes and Miss Kamala. It's very exciting. It's a very exciting day. I saw a great interview with her where she talked about letting nothing steal her joy. And that she talked about her mom and her dad and her family and her husband, of course, and it was just fabulous. It was
and
a
her
great
chucks.
interview.
Her chucks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna wear my chucks tomorrow too.
Yeah, the interviewer actually asked her why she wears them, and she said because they're comfortable, and I've always worn them since I was in college, and just because I'm VP, I don't see any reason to stop wearing them.
And by the way, what the fuck do you care?
And so she's just like, on our level, very relatable. When she brought in her husband, he talked about the few other men in Washington, D.C. finding him, like Amy Coney Barrett's husband finding him.
Can you believe it?
At a party to talk or at some gathering to talk. Like, I'd be like, Doug, now's your chance. Get your best word in with Amy Coney Barrett's husband. Maybe she'll be laying in bed next to her going, babe, maybe you shouldn't sign that.
I was talking to Camilla's old man.
Yeah, I was talking to Doug today, and Doug said, let's check this out. You never know what kind of impact you could have, right? One person, you never know.
Could happen.
The ripple effect, right? Anyway, so the book that I have is called The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. And I'll just read you the inside flap. It says, Dublin, 1918, 3 days in a maternity ward at the height of the Great Flu. A Small World of Work, Risk, Love, and Death by the best-selling author of The Wonder and the Room. Ireland doubly ravaged by war and disease. The nurse Julia Powers works at an understaffed hospital in the city center where expected mothers who have come down with this terrible new flu are quarantined together. And the last time that I was reading, so it's just interesting at the start of the book, she's talking about seeing them sanitizing streets, seeing people wearing masks, and it's just, compared to what's going on now, they didn't have a name for it. They just called it different things like the Great Flu, Scourge, different names.
Scourge?
They didn't know what to call it. And the last time I was reading, they were doing an autopsy, and they're all pregnant women. So of course they were remarking that even for a pregnant woman, her heart was really enlarged. I guess when you're pregnant, your organs of course shift to support the fetus, but I wasn't aware that your heart actually does gain size. And they talked about in the book that her heart was even larger because of the infection, and so much of her organs were affected because of the sickness that she had. And her poor baby was even underweight and didn't make it.
Oh.
Yeah.
You're bumming me out.
Yeah, sorry. It's kind of a bummer. Yeah, but it's cool because it's interesting. It's sort of historical in a way.
Yeah, it is historical.
Yeah.
Because it really happened.
Right.
And
exactly.
It is really happening now.
A light in a druggist's window below us illuminated a handwritten apology. Have run out of carbolic.
Carbolic acid.
Yeah, that's what they were using to cure it.
I'm surprised they didn't get, what's that stuff he was trying to give us?
Passing
Bleach.
shop fronts and houses, I glimpsed hollowed out turnips with penny candles that wavered with flame. I was happy that the old beat of festivity still sounded. On Halloween, when Tim and I were small, we had barmbrack, Barmbrack, the moist fruit bread, toasted at the fire and buttered till the raisins shone. Barmbrack. I always hoped to get the lucky ring in my slice, but I never did. My stomach growled now. How long it had been since that bowl of stew this afternoon.
Stew.
I wondered what Bridie got to eat with the boarders at the mother house. Sorry, I'm drinking coffee too, so I'm going to have a sip right now.
No slurping.
Yeah, so if you don't froth the milk for your coffee, you're really missing out. I highly recommend it.
The frother wasn't that expensive, right?
No, it was less than $40.
That's
Get a decent one for less than $40.
Oh, I guess you do use it every day.
Yeah, you can get cheaper ones, but if you're going to use it a lot, it's not worth it. I wondered what Bridie got to eat with the boarders at the mother house. The tram rattled on, past a dark maze of streets where many of my patients lived, rickety stairways, toppling walls, filthy courts, red brick browned by coal smoke, smashed fan lights over doors were windows, were eyes put out. A Negro man sat slumped against a wall. No, a white man. Ooh, metamorphized, red to brown to blue to black. This poor fellow was at the end of that terrible rainbow. Had anyone run to a telephone exchange to ring for an ambulance? But the tram trundled past before I could make a note of the street. Nothing I could do now. I tried to put him out of my mind. Alighting at my stop, I caught a whiff from the communal kitchen for the needy. Corned beef, cabbage, rather nasty, but it made me even hungrier for my own supper. John Brown's baby had a pimple on his arse, a drunk sang. John Brown's baby has a pimple on his arse. John Brown's baby has a pimple on his arse. And the poor child can't sit down. In the alley, I found my cycle locked safely. I drew up the sides of my skirt in preparation, knotting the tapes for safety. Light blinded me, a high-pitched call. All right there? Two of the women's patrol shone their beams all the way to the back wall to ensure my protection, or to put another way, to check if I was a reeling drunk or up to no good with a soldier. I snapped. Perfectly all right. Very well, carry on. I wheeled my cycle up the alley towards the street. A bell sounded in the factory ahead. Munionettes began spilling out, calling to each other. Their fingers dyed so yellow, I could see it by streetlight. Were these women from Ina Noonan's cannery crew? One of them coughed whoopingly, laughed, coughed again as I pedaled past. At the top of my lane, boys skittered by in motley gear. A bright scarf around a forehead, a checkered tie worn over the nose, men's jackets on backwards, the smallest boy wearing the paper face of a ghost. I only wish they had shoes on their knobby feet. It surprised me that they'd been let out to go out of house at such a time. I'd have thought all doors would be shut. I tried to remember what it was the old ones used to sprinkle on us children at Halloween in the part of the country where Tim and I had grown up. A tall boy blared at me. His bugle was dented, scarred with soldier, plating all worn away at the mouthpiece. Was his father a returned veteran, perhaps? Or a dead one, of course, his bugle sent home in his place. Or perhaps I was being sentimental, and the boy had won it off another in a bet. The younger lads clashed saucepan lids. Apples and nuts, missus. The miniature ghost cried, go on. Would you ever have an old apple or a nut for the party? He sounded drunk to me, quite plausible, since many people believed alcohol could keep the flu at bay. I dug into my purse for a halfpenny, even though he'd called me Mrs. instead of Miss. He blew me a phantom kiss over his shoulder. Clearly, to a child, I looked well past 30. I thought of Delilah Garrett calling me spinster.
Hmm.
Nursing was like being under a spell. You went in very young and came out older than any span of years could make you. Wow. And imagine what our nurses are going through right now. And this is then.
Yeah.
I got chills. I asked myself whether I minded about tomorrow's birthday. The real question was whether I was going to regret it if I never got married. But how could I possibly know for sure until it was too late, which wasn't reason enough to do it, to throw myself headlong at every half viable prospect the way some women did. Regret seemed all too likely either way. When I let myself into the narrow terraced house, it smelled cold, candle stubs burnt in jam jars. My brother was scratching his magpie's glossy head at the table. Ooh, I got creeped.
What?
My brother was scratching his magpie's
Is his
glossy
magpie a
head.
euphemism for something else, or is it an actual bird?
I thought of the old rhyme for counting magpies, one for sorrow, two for joy. Evening, Tim, he nodded. Odd how one took conversation for granted, a ribbon held taut between two people until it was cut. I mentioned too perkily, rather a red letter day. Sister Finnegan was needed up in maternity, so yours truly found herself promoted to acting ward sister. Tim's eyebrows jogged up and down. I had an awful habit of making up for my brother's lack of chatter by doubling my own. I put my bag down and peeled off my coat and cape. The trick was not to ask questions, or only safe ones, to which I could guess the answers. How's your bird? I didn't know if he'd given it a name in his head. Tim didn't meet my eyes very often, but he could manage a half smile. In the summer, he'd found the enormous creature in the alley, grounded by a bejanged leg. He thought a rusty rabbit hutch to roost in. He bought it a rusty rabbit hutch to roost in, and kept the door tight open with a piece of string so it could come and go as it pleased. Its sheeny green tail was always knocking things over. The magpie also did its business wherever it liked, and whenever I complained it was a menace, Tim pretended not to hear. I'd been looking forward to something hot tonight, but clearly the gas was off. What about the water? I tried the tap, only a dribble. Damn and blast it. It was a luxury to let myself curse off shift, to shed the guise of nurse power and be Julia. Tim had a saucepan still hot on the Primus stove. He lit the kerosene flame to bring the water back up to boil for tea. I pushed aside the notebook that was always on the kitchen table for writing notes. Mine were frequent and chatty, Tim's rare and sparse. Whatever was locking his throat had the same grip on his writing hand. I remarked into the silence. Awfully busy today. I lost one patient from convulsions. Tim shook his head in sympathy. He tugged at the touchwood charm on its chain around its neck, as if wishing protection for me. The week he joined up, I'd given him the creepy charm half in jest, an imp with a swollen head of oak and an unattended brass body. Some soldiers called it a thumb sump because the two thumbs perpetually turned up for luck on the tiny arms that went up and down.
I've never seen that before. Sounds cool.
The only features left on Tim's touchwood were two staring eyes. I suppose the rest of its face had been rubbed away by its fretful thumb. I thought of Honor White with her holy beads doubled around her wrist. It wasn't just servicemen who clung to amulets. I added, but it could have gone very much worse, really. I'd have liked to tell Tim about the odd redhead who helped me today, but an uneducated girl with cracked shoes, raised in a home, lodging at a convent. Bridie might sound as if she were the opening line of a joke. I couldn't seem to find words for her. Tim took saucepan lids off two plates and set them down at our places. He waited all this long dark evening to eat tepid food with his big sister. But he didn't care for gush, so all I said was, "Oh, Tim, you've outdone yourself. Runner beans." Another faint smile. Before the war, my brother had been rather more quick-witted and chipper, like Bridie, actually, a real spark. So you must have been at the allotment today. We only had an eighth of an acre, but Tim worked wonders. Potatoes were scarce as gold nuggets. Tonight's ones were perfectly dimpled globes the size of acorns, barely boiled, skin still crisp to the teeth. I had a qualm. It wasn't wasteful if not to leave them on the ground. If they're bigger, though, isn't it? My brother shrugged grandly. There were onions, too, of course. We had them coming out of our ears. The government would approve. The lettuce was holed with a few slugs, but tasted ever so alive. And look at this, celery. They've started selling it as a nerve cure. Would you believe that? I thought that might amuse Tim, but his face stayed blank. Maybe the notion of shattered nerves hit too close to the bone. At the military hospital, they'd called it war neurosis. It could take a bewildering variety of forms, and even civilians got it. I think now we call it PTSD. There was the English woman who'd lost her mind in an air raid and decapitated her own child. They dosed Tim's with chloral
Where is it?
to prevent the nightmares, or to at least make him forget the details when he woke up. It gave him a perpetually queasy stomach. Massages to soothe, walks to invigorate, hypnosis to get my brother's mind back on track, lessons in brush making, carpentry, boot repair to make him feel useful. Tim had been discharged after a few months since he was fairly able compared to so many. The psychologist had admitted he could do nothing from the speechlessness and they needed the bed. The prescription was rest, nourishment, and congenial occupation. How sad. I weaned Tim very gradually off the sedative. These days, he was less jumpy, though he still couldn't stand crowds. Rather more able to eat, especially if I ate with him. I just had to trust that quiet and pottering about, gardening, shopping, cooking, cleaning, tending his magpie, would mend him in time. Anything come in the post this morning? My brother shook his head and made a gesture with his hands. I didn't follow. Pointing into the hall, he shook his head again, almost crossly. Never mind, Tim. He was scraping back his chair and tugging at the table's shallow drawer, the one that always stuck. It doesn't matter, it's okay. I couldn't bear it when Tim had to grab the notebook to make himself understood, the nearest thing to a mammy he'd ever had. It made him feel we were thousands of miles apart. He slid his jagged handwriting over so I could read. Temporary suspension. Of the post? Oh, of delivery, I see. I suppose they've too many sicks sorting of the office, I added ruefully. At the hospital, we've never been allowed a suspension of service, not even for a day. Oh, they suspended mail delivery is what they're saying because they don't have people to deliver it.
Yeah, that could happen.
At the hospital, we've never been allowed a suspension of service, not even for a day. Ours are the gates that cannot close. I wondered how long it would take me to remember not to ask Tim whether any post had come that day. How many weeks before I stopped missing it? This was how civilization might grind to a halt, one rusted up cog at a time. I remarked I ran into some lads dressed up and going around to houses. They've been racking my brain. What was the old one used to sprinkle on us at Halloween to ward off the spells? Tim held up the little glass cruet. Salt, that was it. I took it from him and reminisced. I shook a little onto my hand and half solemnly touched a pinch to my forehead and another to Tim's. He flinched, but bore it. I was so glad Tim had had the flu already and the week before me, just as mildly. Otherwise, I'd be watching him very morning, every night. I'd feared losing my brother for years on end, and then he'd been returned to me, changed utterly. I couldn't endure the idea of having what was left taken forever now. The jam jar candles were guttering in their puddles. Tim rolled a meager, meticulous cigarette. Can I have one? He slid it over and started another for himself. We took our time smoking them. I thought of the lore of veterans brought back from the front with their fags, with their cigarettes. Never be the third to light up a single match. Was that simply good sense because
Right.
of the likelihood of the flare catching a sniper's eye in the dark if it shone out for more than a second? Or was the rule really about preserving the magic circle of friendship, two chums hunkered over a brief flame? Makes me think about my own poor father. He was just a 17-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid out of Missouri. And in the Korean War, his dumbass was smoking a cigarette on the top of his,
The deck
yeah, on the
of the
deck.
ship.
And hearing ping, 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 ping. Somebody had to actually tell him, get your ass below deck. They're shooting at you.
Stupid.
He was just trying to have a cigarette.
He thought he was hot shit.
He was like, I couldn't figure out what that pinging sound was. They were shooting a small firearm at him because they could see his cigarette.
Right.
Dumbass.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the pull of the stars, and we'll transition to some fantasy now with Anne.
That sounded funny the way you said. This is Mask of Shadows by Lindsay Miller. It is like a fantasy book. It doesn't give you like a little. Anyway, I'll just start with chapter 2. Road patrols swapped routes. Wrath tore through the underbrush, stolen spears slung across his shoulder and bouncing on his back. I nicked their reins, but they might follow. Most loyal guards I've ever seen. You get much off them? I stopped and turned an ear to the forest behind us. Nothing coming. Even if the guards chased us, they'd pass out from heat sickness. Sorry. I could barely stand the humid air in trousers and a shirt. Armor was a sweaty torture. Not enough, he skidded through the mud at the edge of a lake and jumped onto a rock, leaving a track straight into the water. He leapt from stone to stone along the water's edge. Think having only 8 fingers is acceptable? Grella da Sousa, our gang leader, who ran every street fight, robbery, and gambling house in the district of Kursk, took Rath's little finger when we were 9. Rath had only skimmed enough for room and board, but that day we dropped below quota. We hadn't missed quota since. Who needs fingers? I ripped off my mask, timing each breath with my strides. Breathing through linen was like gasping underwater, much like wearing a mask we have to wear. I lifted some pearls and gems. Should be enough to cover us. Let's go. Rath veered right back onto the bank. I followed. I had to. Grell had sucked me into this profession when I was 8. He gave me the option of either paying him a tribute or losing a finger for every coin I stole in his district. Can you imagine? 8-year-old me liked my fingers. Rath and I had worked together, saving wisely and rigging bets liberally. But I'd no sooner trust him to guard my back as Grell. Least Grell was upfront about clipping fingers. Grell had lost his finger in a fight, learned from it, and saw no wrong in teaching us to live by breaking us down piece by piece. I slipped my hand into the lady's purse and pulled out her small silver ring. The band scraped over my busted knuckles, but it was prettier than anything I'd ever owned. You're dawdling, Rath turned to me, now running backwards. A tree loomed over his shoulders. Losing focus in your old age? Sharper and younger than you still. I studied the crest on the ring. Running and robbery went hand in hand, and I could outrun Rath with my eyes closed. Mind yourself. Always do. He smacked into the tree. Rath was a terrible thief. He wanted a real licensed shop with customers and as little fencing as possible, but he'd never make enough to buy his way into the merchant class running under Grell. He'd never make enough without me either, and he couldn't double cross me because of it. Grell let us keep enough to get by and took enough to keep us crawling back to him. I'd set my sights on cheaper dreams, buying my way into the military. I hefted the purse from my belt, tugged Wrath out of his tangle with the tree, and slowed our pace. Wrath peered over my shoulder into the purse. Inga's new silver coins and Erlin's useless old gold clinked around next to a piece of paper. After our queen Ignacy ended the civil war between Erland and Alana, she combined the two nations into Igna and created a new set of currencies. It was meant, sorry, I just got this picture of a coin with Trump's face on it, sorry. It was meant to unite us or some such nonsense, but I kept finding Erland gold in Erland pockets. They couldn't let go of the past. Skimming, Wrath elbowed me, not like you. I'm not reckless. I held up the piece of paper, hiding my fingers behind it as I lifted the ring and squeezed it over an old broken knuckle. And I like my fingers intact. Excuse you. Wrath touched the last three fingers of his uninjured hand to his lips, thumb and forefinger curled against his palm. I'm recklessly ambitious. Who needs fingers? An ambitious ass. I unfolded the paper and grinned, praying to the triad won't grow that finger back. Wrath scowled and made the motion again, exaggerating the move. What's that? Poster. Emblazoned across the top were branches of lightning striking the green tree of Erland over the blue waves of Alona. I think it's Alona. The Elonian words beneath were repeated in Erlanian, and both were useless to me. What's it say? Auditions. No. What's it say? I could read a handful of words, names and numbers mostly, but Grell preferred to have us totally at his mercy. Auditions. Wrath traced the Elonian and squinted. He was from the southern coast of Alona, and it showed in the bronze hues of his dark skin and the gray flecks in his black eyes. Salted eyes, he called them. Our queen of the eastern spires and lady of lightning requires a new opal for her left hand. Auditions are open to those who receive an audition or individuals displaying appropriate skill and determination. Opal was dead then. I picked up our pace. Our queen's left hand was her collection of assassins and personal guards named for the rings she wore: ruby, emerald, opal, and amethyst. They belonged to her, and she did as she pleased, killing those who threatened her rule. Like the Erland holdouts, the ones holed away up north who'd started the civil war with Alona, they'd used their territory, Nasea, as a distraction to save themselves when the war went rotten. Now Nasea, my country and my people, was dead and gone. It would take me years to get into the military so I could hunt down the Erland lords responsible, but if I auditioned, I'd have a way into the palace. They'd be mine now. They'd no right to live while Nasea stood raised and empty. Rodolfo de Abreu, the mage who'd done what we'd all dreamed of and murdered the Erlands who'd created the shadows, had the right idea. Kill them and make sure they don't stir up trouble again. Of course, he'd ended up dead, but so had the Erland mages feeling the war. I could finish but what he'd started and avenge Nasea in one fell swoop. 6 days until the audition, I smacked Wrath's shoulder. Read it to me again, the invitation part. Auditions for those with an invitation or appropriately displayed skills. Wrath stuffed the poster into my chest pocket. Who you think got invitations? Young nobles and their friends, I said without hesitation. Keeps it fair if they think one of theirs is part of the left hand and will be for years to come. I'd never killed anyone, but if our queen asked, how could I take issue? She ended the war and corralled the nobles. She was the only person keeping us safe from noble greed, and they courted assassination when they betrayed her, just like Wrath and I knew we could hang for thieving. But I'd have to win to get close to nobles, and I'd never fought trained opponents in a straight bout. Surely assassins didn't fight fair, right? There's got to be more to it, I said. The auditions were a closed event, and I'd never heard about what was involved. If there wasn't any, my ass who wanted a title could audition. If there wasn't any, if there wasn't, any ass who wanted a title could audition. They must make you kill someone or something. The gentle way you say that sets my soul on edge. I knocked him with my shoulder. If you can feel your soul, then you need a physician. Ooh, so do you. Wrath ripped through a tangle of vines and stumbled onto the path back to town. He'd have been perfect. He'd have been the perfect fighter with broad shoulders and big muscles. But he winced at blood and took to numbers more than punches, even after years of robbing coaches. What would you even do? Rob them on your way to audition? Shows determination, doesn't it? Determination to die. He shuddered. You never killed anyone, right? None of those soldiers out there rotting. I sucked on my teeth. That was a bounty I didn't need. I dreamed about, did you like it?
Yeah.
Oh, I dreamed about killing nobles, kicking faceless Erland lords, till they knew deep in their bones why I'd come for them, till Nasea's final dreams were seared into their souls. But those were dreams. What would it matter if I had? I scraped my nail across the silver ring. Plenty of Erland lords had made fortunes from the razing, which means tearing it down. Lords like Horatio del Seve, whose name I burned into my memory as soon as I'd heard he was selling off Nisaean land. Soldiers would kill us just as quick. But it would have been a fair fight. We're thieves. It's their job. I scowled. Nothing fair about fighting armored soldiers. You're the sort for auditions. He stomped after me, loud and breathy, and full of useless opinions. He talked about the folks he'd like to have a shot at often enough, smashing people's faces in for money. I already get paid to fight. I rounded on him, grabbed his collar, and shoved him against the tree. They know what they're getting into. They sign up to fight, just like me. Don't act like you don't depend on me winning. I'm not killing people. The spears rattled on his back. Neither am I. You're rigging bets, and I'm winning fights. Fine. He jabbed me in the ribs and darted around me. Grell's waiting. Come on. We hit Tulin a while later, sweaty and shaky. The guards in Grell's pocket led us into the city. I twisted the lady's ring around my finger, glanced down the alley, and pulled it off. Wrath was my only companion in the dark, and he was doubled over his knees trying to catch his breath. Our queen had touched this ring, had pressed her seal into the silver. I'd only ever seen her from afar. I'd make a deal with the lady. If I got the ring past Grell, I was clever enough to audition and serve our queen. If I didn't, I would recover in time to audition. I slipped my knife out of my sheath, slipped my shirt off my shoulder, and drew the tip across my upper arm. Blood welled over the blade, pain burning up my shoulder, and I wiped my knife clean on my sleeve. I pressed the ring against the skin above the cut and wrapped a stolen handkerchief around it. The ring stayed in place. So he faking, like he put on like he got injured or something.
So it sounds like.
Yeah. A little pain, a little pain, a pretty payoff. My blood to seal the lady's prayer. I wrapped it a few more times, enough to disguise the bulge and let the blood seep through and make it look real. No sign of the ring, a lot of blood, and Wrath was still gasping over his boots. Perfect. The door to the starved hatter swung open, and Grell shouted, "Check Wrath twice." Wrath groaned and struggled to stand. Lorne, one of Grell's chattier guards, lumbered out into the light. I leaned against the door. Even better, people trusted you if you remembered their name and their problems. "You're working late." I sucked on my water skin while Lorne patted his way up Wrath's legs. "Thought you'd be suffering through another night with your kid." Kayet got the day shift. Kayet got the day shift. Lorne unlaced Wrath's boots and yanked up his pants legs, knocking his way around Wrath's calves and hips for a while before sliding up to his chest and fluffing out his shirt. "Don't think it matters. Kid never wants to sleep when we do." I rubbed my arm. Pins and needles crawled over my shoulder, but I nodded along like I understood. I couldn't imagine a 2-year-old being reasonable about sleeping. "What happened to you?" Lorne slapped Wrath on the shoulder and pushed him out of the way. "Got stabbed." I held out my bleeding arm and spread my legs, keeping my face neutral. Wrath's head jerked to me. I ignored him. He couldn't lie to save his life. Blood kept guards away, and I knew Grell was listening. Drawing attention to a hiding spot wasn't the brightest, but if I named it up front, he'd never think I had anything to hide. "Landed on some fancy pointy hat pin in the coach." "You keep it?" Lorne checked my pockets and shoes. "No, it was wood." Lorne snorted. "Mouth open." I stuck out my tongue and turned my head from side to side. Lorne collected our purses and walked back to the Hatter. I guess that's the place they were hanging out. Clapping Wrath on the shoulder again and patting my uninjured arm. Wrath and I glanced at each other. He hooked an arm around my shoulders. "Hatpin, was it?" I gritted my teeth. He was smart-mouthed as that noble lady. "Shut it." "Great. Now I needed dirt on him to keep us even." Collateral, huh? That was the end of chapter 2.
Fascinating. We've gone to medieval times. Thank you, Anne. Just wanted to give out my email address again. It's woodcl, that's C as in cat, L as in Larry, woodcl @elac.edu. And my name is Lynn, last name is Wood. Feel free to send me an email if you are a student, you know of a student who's struggling, or you want to apply but you're not sure. I would gladly hold your hand and help you do everything you need to do, or show you the way to do it yourself. Okay. woodcl@elac.edu. Feel free to send me an email. And yeah, that's all I have. Thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for reading today, babe.
Thanks for letting me read.
I'll be back on, today's Tuesday. I'll be back on Wednesday. Ooh, the inauguration is tomorrow. So I will be watching that all freaking day. But I will still be reading on Facebook at 3 o'clock tomorrow on Wednesday. So you can catch me there. Yeah, today's Tuesday. Take care. I hope you're safe and warm wherever you are. And I'm signing off. Thank you. Bye.